Buyers shop with their eyes first, and if your home doesn't look like top dollar, it's not going to sell for top dollar. So my question for you is, would you spend $2,000, $3,000 if it got you $20,000 or $30,000 in return when you sold your home? Well, that's exactly what we're going to talk about in today's video. We're going to talk about the idea behind staging your home, why it's important, along with why it matters. We're going to talk about the biggest mistakes that sellers make, along with taking you on a journey with before and after photos of a real property being staged. And then lastly, we're going to talk about the cost of staging, how staging actually works if you end up hiring someone to stage your home. If your goal is to get your home sold fast and for the most amount of money, then chances are some form of staging is going to be required. So what is staging? It's strategic visual marketing using furniture, color, as well as layout, which is a big difference from renovating your home or in some cases decorating your home. Staging your home is really about making each room look its best by taking away your personal style and also not having to do major renovations or upgrades. So why does staging actually matter? Well, the truth is 90+% of buyers start their search online. And the photos, the videos, all of that exposure of your home are where the first showings are taking place. Remember, buyers buy emotionally and then justify logically. What I mean by that is emotion drives buying decisions. And by staging a home, it makes it feel updated, as well as spacious, move-in ready, all of these things that help drive that emotion of the buyer. And we're currently in a market where buyers are picky. Interest rates are high, affordability is low. Buyers just want to find the perfect home. And one nice thing about staging is that it creates this perceived value. So what I want to do here is take you between some before and after videos, photos of a property that I just staged and ended up selling in the very first weekend for our asking price. Now, one thing to note about this particular property is that it was clean. It had been remodeled at some point. It wasn't necessarily today's taste for a lot of buyers out there, but the sellers had spent a lot of money making the property their own. Now, with that said, the home had a lot of positive features already going for it. Had light coming in, they had already redone pretty much everything, but because the home was a split level property, we had 7 different types of flooring in the home, and we had a lot of empty space. It was important to bring in furniture that not only matched the style of this home, but also helped show it in its best light. Now, unfortunately, I took the photos before the house was completely empty, so you're going to see some furniture in the photos that wasn't really there when the sellers were living there. It was just there when they were moving out, but you'll get the idea as we walk you through this home. Now, I will say, I've been doing this 20 years. This is probably one of the most transformative stagings that I've done on a property. It really helped show this property in its best light. In fact, we got a lot of attention on it, and it ultimately led to having awesome photos and videos taken on this property. And if you've heard me before, exposure drives demand and demand drives price. So the more exposure you get on a property, ultimately the higher price you're going to get for that home. And so how we get the most amount of exposure possible is we take the best photos possible. We stage the home, we declutter the home, we do everything right in that property so that we get the best photos that we can use online. Because as we discussed earlier, you only have a couple of seconds to make a first impression. So we want that first impression to stand out so that we can get those buyers in the property to get that demand and ultimately drive up that price. But with that said, I want to walk you through a couple of different rooms in the house so that you can get an idea of before and after when it comes to staging. Now, as you walk into this property, you're greeted with a couple of different flooring types. As I mentioned, there's 7 different flooring types in this property, which is usually a huge turnoff for any buyers out there. They typically want one flooring running throughout the home. They don't want a bunch of different types of flooring. And this property is split level, so you already have a lot going on. Then you add all of these different flooring types on top of it, which in the mind of a buyer can create a lot of chaos because they don't really know how to deal with this sort of thing. So what we wanted to do is bring a coastal vibe into this house. Because it's located near the beach, we really wanted to make buyers feel like that. So in the case of my stager, she used a lot of bright colors along with a neutral palette to help tie everything in. But as you can see in the first room, as you walk into this property, before it was just a dark porcelain tile flooring, and you can see there's a lot of light coming in, but it can be very hard to visualize what this room would look like. Where would the TV go? Where would your couches go? Where would you have chairs? So on and so forth. So what we did, so when I say we, I'm basically talking about the stager. I'm not talking about me, but I'm using we in this conversation here. So what we did was help maximize the space in this room. This is a really big room, high vaulted ceilings, a lot of light coming in, but really want to show how much space space is in this particular room. So as you can see, she put a couch at the back wall, she added some chairs, as well as a couple of pieces of furniture, but as you can see, it really helped this room stand out. So this is the very first thing you saw when you walked into this home. Now from there, you can walk down the stairs into what would be the dining room. Now, the dining room from the photos that I took actually looks like a small room. It looks like, how would you put a large table in here? How would you fit any other furniture? But you can see here, we added a table, we added chairs, we added additional furniture in this room, along with putting some artwork on the wall, really to help this room stand out, because you have to pass through this room in order to get to the kitchen and the family room. We wanted this room to tie in everything from the living room when you first walk in to the family room on the bottom level. Now from there, I'm going to take you into the kitchen. Now notice the before pictures of the kitchen is when the family was still living there, right? There's things on the countertops, there's a rug on the ground. The door is actually open, headed into the garage, and we're using a regular lens on this particular photo. But then when we jump to the after photo, you can see that we took all of that clutter off the countertops. We added a couple of things, some plants here and there. We removed the rug. We shut that door to the garage, removed the magnets from the side of the refrigerator, and we used a wide angle lens on top of opening the blinds to let all that light in. So when you look at the before and after photos, it looks like a much larger kitchen than the previous photo that I took, on top of just being way more spacious because we've removed all of that clutter from the countertops. And if you're somebody out there thinking you don't want to pay the money for staging, just look at the simple things that are done in those photos that made a huge impact in the way that kitchen's being perceived. It looks like an entirely different kitchen by making a couple of little changes. Now the next photo I'll talk about is the family room that's right off the kitchen. They did some custom cabinetry on the back wall. Now you can see from the previous photo they had removed most of the things from that shelving prior to me actually coming over. But as you'll notice from my photo, we added a couple little tchotchke things to a couple of the shelves, to the main shelf in there. We added a table, chairs, some photos on the wall, and again, we're using that wide angle camera to make that room look way larger than it actually is. Now again, we're not trying to deceive anyone by having professional photography and using a wide angle lens, but the reality is if you're not impressing these buyers online, they're never going to come in to actually see the home. So while we're not altering anything in the photo, we're just using the best photography available so that we can make those photos stand out. Now again, I'm not going to walk you through the entire house, but I do want to show you a couple of other photos before and after so that you get an idea of how much staging improves different rooms in a property. Now this is the actual family room as you look back towards the fireplace. As you can see, they had a huge couch in there, which is completely fine because they were already living in the home. But the bigger the furniture is, the less spacious that room feels. So what my stager did is brought in a medium-sized sofa, faced it in the same direction that you would likely put the TV, but instead of putting a TV, we used a mirror, we added some things to the wall, we added some plants, which again helps the room feel spacious, but also really clean and simple. Now again, going back, if you're one of those people that are against staging, you're only watching this because I posted a video and you just want to see what I have to say, but you're against staging entirely and you're not going to do it, I want you to take a look at these photos. This is a before and after of one of the guest bathrooms. And as you can see in this photo, all we did was add a couple of things to the countertops, some plants, there's a towel there, we added some towels at the back of the room, but you can see between the before and after photo what a huge difference those little items made. So if you're someone that's against staging but you want to help your home show in the best way possible, decluttering is one of the easiest ways. Getting rid of all your personal stuff and bringing in some small things like plants, like towels, just to help add some accent colors and break everything up while keeping it really neutral and clean. Now again, I could continue to go through different photos in this property to show you how each room was transformed, but I don't want to bore you to death. I think you get the idea of how staging helps maximize space, helps show the property in its best light. But with that said, I want to talk about the biggest mistakes that I see sellers make when putting their homes on the market or trying to stage it themselves. A lot of people out there are using big, old, outdated furniture. And while I realize this is the furniture that you use, that you live in, you want to be comfortable, so on and so forth, sometimes it makes sense to sacrifice comfort, at least for a couple of weeks while putting your home on the market and trying to get the best offer possible. Because again, big outdated furniture makes rooms feel small, and old furniture makes the home seem outdated, even if it's been upgraded. So you want to bring in a style of furniture that kind of matches the upgrades of the home. Now, if the home hasn't been upgraded in forever, you still want to bring in newer furniture, but you're not going to be really modern about it, right? You're going to bring in things that help that property show in the best light possible. On top of that, you want to avoid over decorating, right? I can't tell you how many times I walk into properties, every shelf, every countertop has something on it. Every wall has a photo on it. Because honestly, the simpler, the better in many cases. The less stuff you have in a property the bigger it's going to feel, the more clean it's going to feel. And so that means if you have old drapes or old rugs, a lot of dark items in a property, you really want to remove that stuff because oftentimes it can actually take away from the room. I'm one of those real estate agents when I walk into a property and you have rugs on the ground in every single room, like the kitchen and the bathrooms or what have you. Before we take photos, I'm removing those rugs. I want to show the flooring. I want to make the room feel large, right? Rugs and drapes and all of these things can actually make a room feel a lot smaller than it actually is. And while I know it's your home and that's the way you live, the reality is a lot of buyers out there are watching HGTV. They're watching all of these different shows. And these shows are staged. The furniture is staged. And while people are living in some of these properties, oftentimes when the buyers are walking through them, it doesn't look like they are. So in a buyer's mind, that's kind of what they're expecting when they walk into a property, especially after they've seen the photos online. You want the home to appear like it does online. Now, I know there are people out there that say, hey, you should do virtual staging. Virtual staging is cheap. We can show the property in its best light by just placing furniture in these rooms. And I do agree that it does help the photos online. But what happens when a buyer walks into the property and it looks different than it did online? Their perception changes. A lot of people get really confused in the process and now they can't see it the same way. So while I'm not completely against virtual staging, I do think that staging your home and the extra money it costs will actually benefit you in the long run. So if you're somebody that's getting your home ready, what should you be spending your money on versus what should you be skipping? Well, I don't think you should be throwing money at a full remodel on a property before you move out. Chances are you're not going to get dollar for dollar in return. In fact, your return on investment is likely to be a lot less than the money you put into that property. So I would rather you spend money on things like painting the interior of the house, make it neutral, spending money on things like light fixtures, hardware, faucets, doorknobs, that sort of thing, on top of staging your home. Now, what I say is if you have a lot of furniture in your home, use your garage for a staging area. Remove as much of the furniture as you're okay with removing so that you can live your life into the garage or into a storage unit that you decide to rent. And then if you just don't have any furniture in there, you can bring a stager in to stage that home. Now, if you're in the position where your home is vacant, that's obviously a much better situation. But I realize most people need to sell their home before they move, so they're not going to be completely out of it. But that doesn't mean you can't bring a stager in to do some accent items, bring in pieces of furniture here and there on top of what you already have. So in my opinion, the biggest bang for your buck after you've painted and done some of those things in your property is paying for a stager to come in and stage your home. But with that said, if you're not able to do any of the things that we talked about because your budget is that tight, then I would really focus on decluttering the home, trying to get as much stuff out of the property, taking those things off the shelves, off the countertops, removing as much furniture as possible while depersonalizing, like taking personal photos and that sort of thing out of the property, and focus on lighting, right? Lighting makes a huge difference in a property. In fact, the brighter a property, the more spacious it actually feels. And that's really where hiring a professional real estate agent comes in, someone like myself. Once you decide that you're going to sell your home, before you start doing all of these things, talk to a professional in your market, get the recommendations that they're talking about, right? And sometimes it may take talking to one or two people to get different opinions on what you should do. If anyone's telling you need to fully upgrade your home in order to sell it, I would move along to the next person. But if you get someone telling you, hey, you need to declutter, you need to do some of these things, and that's kind of what you were thinking anyway, then that's probably the right person because they're not telling you exactly what you want to hear. They're telling you what you need to do in order to maximize price. And sometimes that goes against what the seller actually believes. Sellers don't want to hear that they have to do anything, that they have to spend money in order to maximize the value of their home. But the reality is, oftentimes that is necessary. So if you have an agent telling you that you need to do these things in order to help your home stand out, then you probably have an honest realtor on your side. But with that real estate agent should be able to walk you through a game plan of what needs to be done prior to having photos on that home, prior to putting it on the market, so that ultimately you can help your home stand out and maximize your selling. Now, one of the questions I get all of the time is, well, if I decide to do staging, how does it work? Well, here's the thing. Each stager works a little bit differently. Not all stagers are the same. Some stagers charge you a one-time fee up front, where some require you to pay that once the staging is complete, while others allow you to pay it through escrow. On top of that, some stagers charge one fee for the entire duration of that staging, whereas other stagers charge you every single month the staging is in your home. So it's going to vary depending on who you're talking to. Now, me personally, my stager doesn't require you to pay the money up front. They allow you to pay it through escrow. And at the same time, she allows the staging to stay in the home for a certain period of time, say 90, 120 days, before there might be an additional fee. Now, oftentimes we've gone over that initial staging period and she hasn't charged my client. So it's important to understand how long your real estate agent thinks that property is going to be on the market to get an idea of what to expect. Now, with that said, we just staged a 2,520 square foot home, and it was roughly $3,000 to stage that home. Now, we sold it in the very first weekend. So some people could look at that and go, well, you wasted $3,000 on staging that home. I look at it as we spent $3,000 to get that home sold in the very first weekend at the asking price. So with that, I hope you found some value in why I think staging is important. If you did, do me a favor and hit that thumbs up. Consider subscribing to the channel to stay updated on everything you need to know in order to sell your home. Do me a favor before you go, let me know which room in your house would need the most staging. And if you're someone thinking about selling your home and you need to declutter, do me a favor and check out this video right here.